Let's get one thing straight. Detachment in dating isn't about playing emotional chess. It's not about feigning disinterest when your heart is racing. It's not about calculating response times to seem busy. And it's definitely not about building walls around your feelings. Detachment is emotional sovereignty. It's standing firmly in your own power. It's the ability to remain whole regardless of how he responds to you. Too many women fall into the pattern of believing that effort equals value in dating. If I just initiate more conversations, if I just plan thoughtful dates, if I just show him how perfectly we fit together, he'll finally see my worth and fully commit. But here's the uncomfortable truth. When you operate from that space of proving yourself, when you overinvest before he's matched your energy, when your happiness hinges on his response time, he can sense it. He feels the weight of your expectations, the pressure of your hopes, and that energy doesn't inspire pursuit. It smothers it. But a woman who embodies detachment is fundamentally different. She's magnetically attractive, not because she's strategically distant, but because she isn't seeking external validation to feel complete. She navigates dating with the quiet, unshakable confidence of someone who knows her worth isn't up for negotiation, regardless of who recognizes it. And that quality, that self-contained fullness, is what men find absolutely irresistible. Now, let's talk about what detachment actually looks like in your dating life. It means you don't anxiously check your phone every 5 minutes waiting for his text. You're not analyzing every word of his message, searching for hidden meanings or signs of his interest level. You have a rich, full life that continues whether he's responsive or not. It means you don't abandon your existing world the moment someone interesting appears. You don't cancel plans with friends, neglect your passions, or rearrange your schedule to accommodate his every availability. Your life remains the priority because you understand that the right person adds to it rather than becomes it. It means you don't force connections that aren't flowing naturally. You're not overgiving your time, energy, or affection to someone who's showing minimal investment. You recognize the difference between pursuing what you want and trying to convince someone to want you. And most importantly, it means you don't attach your emotional state to his actions. His slow response doesn't mean you're unworthy. His cancellation doesn't mean you're not enough. His uncertainty doesn't reflect your value. When you're truly detached, you understand that your worth remains constant, regardless of anyone else's ability to recognize it. But listen carefully, detachment doesn't mean you become emotionally unavailable. It doesn't mean you hide your feelings, avoid vulnerability, or approach dating with cynicism. True detachment means you love openly, but without clinging. You express interest without demanding outcomes. You allow connections to develop at their natural pace rather than forcing them into your ideal timeline. You understand that authentic relationships form through freedom, not through pressure. And here's the beautiful transformation. When you master detachment, you don't experience less love. You invite deeper love. You naturally attract partners who respect your boundaries, who are intrigued by your self-sufficiency, who feel inspired to pursue you rather than smothered by you. You create space for relationships built on mutual desire rather than need, on choice rather than obligation. The kind of connections where both people show up fully, not because they're filling each other's emptiness, but because they're sharing their wholeness. Let's talk about energy, because in the realm of attraction, it communicates more powerfully than words ever could. Your energy precedes your message. It fills the space between you before you've even spoken. It's what he intuitively feels about you before he consciously processes it. And when it comes to dating, your energy is either drawing him closer or pushing him away, whether you realize it or not. You've experienced this yourself. You've met someone who didn't need to say much, but there was something captivating about them, something that made you lean in, something that made you want to know more. And you've also encountered people whose energy felt uncomfortable, too eager, too intense, too hungry for validation, and you found yourself instinctively creating distance. This is why energy matters more than techniques, more than perfect texts, more than carefully curated dating profiles. Think about when you're waiting for him to confirm plans. If your energy is grounded, peaceful, and genuinely detached, the waiting doesn't consume you. You send the message and continue living your life because your sense of self isn't hanging in the balance of his response. But if your energy is anxious, impatient, or overinvested, the waiting becomes torturous. Your mind spirals into questions. Why hasn't he responded yet? Did I say something wrong? Maybe I should follow up. Should I make other plans? What if he's losing interest? That anxious energy doesn't stay contained within you. It seeps into your actions. It makes you check your phone compulsively. It makes you craft the perfect casual follow-up text. It makes you postpone other plans just in case he becomes available. It causes you to overanalyze every word of his response when it finally comes. And that's when the connection starts to unravel, because your behavior has shifted from authentic to strategic. Here's what most women don't realize about the psychology of pursuit. The moment your energy changes from being contentedly yourself to needing his validation, the entire dynamic transforms. You stop being the intriguing woman who caught his attention initially, the one who was effortlessly herself, the one who had her own vibrant world. Instead, you become someone who's seeking something from him, someone whose emotional state depends on his action. And men can sense this shift instantly. They may not be able to articulate it in words, but they feel the difference. They feel when you've placed their responses at the center of your emotional world. They feel when your happiness has become contingent on their attention. They feel when you're waiting rather than living. And that sensing, that awareness of your attachment to outcomes, it creates pressure. And pressure is the antithesis of attraction. On the flip side, when a woman is centered in her worth, when she knows she's enough regardless of dating outcomes, that energy is magnetically attractive. She's not obsessively checking her phone because she's engaged in her life. She's not analyzing his every word because she's secure in herself. She's not waiting around for him because she has plans, passions, people, and purposes that matter to her. She's not chasing, she's living. And that energy, that self-contained completeness, that's what men can't resist. Here's something crucial to understand about male psychology. Men don't respond to pressure, they respond to inspiration. When you're coming from a place of need, needing him to validate you, needing his attention to feel worthy, needing the relationship to unfold according to your timeline, you unknowingly create resistance. But when you're coming from a place of wholeness, knowing you're already complete, engaging with him from genuine interest rather than emotional need, you create space for him to choose you freely, to pursue you naturally. That's the paradox of attraction. The less you need someone to validate your worth, the more worthy of pursuit you become. The less you chase someone, the more they want to catch you. The less you try to control the outcome, the more the outcome tends to favor you. It's not about manipulation, it's about energy. It's not about strategies, it's about authentic presence. So the next time you feel yourself getting anxious about his response, pause, take a deep breath, reconnect with yourself, ask, would I still be whole if this connection faded away? Remind yourself that you don't need to control the unfolding of this relationship to be okay. You don't need his validation to be valuable, because your energy speaks volumes before your words even enter the conversation. And when you master that energy, when you truly embody detachment, you become absolutely irresistible. The power of selective attention in dating is something we rarely discuss, yet it's one of the most influential forces in attraction. When you're constantly available, constantly reaching out, constantly filling the space between you and him, you unintentionally remove something essential from the dynamic, the opportunity for him to wonder about you, to think about you when you're not there, to actually miss your presence. This isn't about playing mind games or deliberately ignoring someone to manipulate their feelings. It's about understanding a fundamental truth about human psychology. People value what they have to earn. When something is too easily obtained, too readily available, too predictable, it loses its sense of value, not because it's actually worth less, but because the human mind is wired to appreciate what requires effort to acquire. Think about how you feel when someone is always available to you, always responding instantly, always free whenever you suggest plans. There's a comfort in that, yes, but there's also something missing, the delicious anticipation, the wondering, the slight uncertainty that keeps interest alive. Without realizing it, you begin to take their availability for granted. Their presence becomes expected rather than appreciated. This same psychological principle applies to dating. When a woman makes herself completely available, constantly initiating contact, always free at a moment's notice, always responding immediately, she unknowingly removes the space needed for desire to develop. She becomes a given, not a pursuit. A certainty, not a possibility. And certainty, while comfortable, rarely inspires passionate pursuit. But a woman who practices healthy selective attention creates natural intrigue, not because she's deliberately withholding, but because she has a full, engaging life that doesn't revolve around any one relationship. She responds when she can, not the moment a message arrives. She's available sometimes, not all the time. She shares parts of herself gradually, not all at once. And this natural pacing, this selective attention, it creates the space where attraction thrives. Men are particularly responsive to this dynamic. There's something in the male psychology that activates when there's a healthy challenge. Not an impossible obstacle, not game playing, but the natural challenge that comes from pursuing someone who values their own time, who has standards, who isn't desperately seeking approval. When a man senses that winning your attention means something, because your attention isn't freely given to everyone, that's when his pursuit instinct awakens. Think about the last time you really wanted something. Chances are it wasn't handed to you without effort. It wasn't completely guaranteed. There was some element of uncertainty, some requirement of investment on your part. That's the space where desire lives, in the small gap between possibility and certainty. Too much uncertainty feels unsafe, but too much certainty kills attraction. The sweet spot is in between. And this selective attention creates healthy mystery. Not artificial mystery where you deliberately hide who you are, but the natural mystery that comes from being a complex, multifaceted woman who reveals herself gradually over time. It's the difference between handing someone an open book versus inviting them to turn each page with growing interest. Both approaches share the same content eventually, but the experience, the emotional journey is entirely different. When you immediately make yourself completely available to someone you've just met, you deprive both of you of this journey of discovery. You rob him of the chance to wonder about you, to look forward to learning more, to feel that rush of excitement when you do respond. And you rob yourself of the experience of being pursued, of being sought after, of being valued enough that someone is willing to invest time and energy to gain your attention. The irony is that by creating some space, by not being instantly available, by allowing natural gaps in communication, you don't push him away. You actually create the conditions that draw him closer. You make him think about you when you're not there. You give him the chance to miss your unique energy. You allow him to recognize how much he looks forward to connecting with you. This doesn't mean you play hard to get to the point of frustration. It doesn't mean you deliberately ignore messages or create artificial scarcity. It means you live your life with genuine fullness, with commitments and interests and people that matter to you. It means you don't drop everything the moment he texts. It means you show up when you can with full presence when you do, rather than always being partially available. When you practice this kind of selective attention, something shifts in the dynamic. He starts appreciating the time you do share, because he recognizes it's valuable. He starts putting in more effort because he sees that your attention isn't a guarantee. He starts pursuing more intentionally because he understands that your life is happening with or without him. And that's when the chase truly begins. Not because you're running away, but because you're standing firmly in your worth, letting him come to you. Let's talk about one of the most frustrating dynamics in dating, the pursuit-retreat cycle. You've likely experienced it. The moment you lean in with enthusiasm, he seems to pull back. The more you pursue, the more distant he becomes. The harder you try to close the gap, the wider it grows. It's maddening, it's confusing, and it happens in dating scenarios everywhere. But it's not random. It's actually rooted in deep psychological. When you chase someone who's pulling away, you're actually reinforcing their retreat. This isn't about playing games or being manipulative. It's about understanding the fundamental dynamics of human connection. Think about it from your own experience. When someone gives you space, don't you naturally feel curious about them? And when someone is constantly seeking your attention, don't you sometimes feel an urge to create distance? This is the paradox that most women miss in dating. Letting go often brings him closer, while holding on too tightly pushes him away. It seems counterintuitive, but it's consistently true. The more you try to force a connection, the more resistance you create. The more you demand reassurance, the more uncertainty you generate. The more you chase, the faster he runs. This happens because pursuit creates pressure, and pressure activates the primal response to escape. When a man feels pursued too intensely, when your texts are frequent and urgent, when your questions seek constant reassurance, when your availability is unlimited, he doesn't feel desired, he feels hunted. And that triggers a deeply wired response to create space, to recover autonomy, to breathe. But what's fascinating is what happens when you interrupt this cycle. When you stop chasing, when you redirect your energy back to yourself, when you genuinely let go of the need for a particular outcome, something shifts. The pressure lifts. The dynamic resets. And often, remarkably often, he begins to move towards you again. This isn't manipulation. It's not about pretending you don't care when you do. It's about actually reconnecting with your center, with your wholeness, with the understanding that your value isn't dependent on whether this particular person chooses you. It's about letting go of the illusion of control and allowing the connection to either find its natural flow or reveal itself as not meant for you. The truth is, healthy relationships cannot form under pressure. They need space to breathe, room to unfold naturally, freedom to develop at their own pace. And when you're constantly pursuing, constantly checking in, constantly seeking validation, you remove that essential space. You unknowingly suffocate the very connection you're trying to nurture. This is why detachment is so powerful. When you detach from needing a specific outcome, when you release the grip of control, you create room for authentic connection to form. You allow him to choose you freely rather than respond to you out of obligation or guilt. You invite him to pursue you because he wants to, not because he feels pressured to reciprocate your efforts. Think about the most magnetic people you know. They don't chase approval. They don't pursue validation. They don't need constant reassurance to feel secure. They move through life with a quiet confidence and inner knowing that they'll be okay, regardless of any one person's response to them. And that energy, that genuine detachment from outcomes, is precisely what draws others to them. The moment you truly let go of trying to control how a man responds to you, how quickly a relationship develops, whether he texts back immediately, that's when everything changes. That's when you break the pursuit-retreat cycle. That's when you step out of the exhausting dance of chasing and being avoided. That's when you create the conditions for him to actually miss you, to wonder about you, to want to close the distance himself. This isn't about becoming passive in dating. It's not about never expressing interest or never initiating contact. It's about the energy behind your actions. Are you reaching out from a place of wholeness or from a place of need? Are you expressing interest from genuine curiosity or from fear of losing connection? Are you giving him space because you're comfortable with uncertainty or because you're playing a strategic game? The pursuit-retreat cycle ends when you genuinely release the need to pursue, not as a tactic to make him chase you, but as a recognition that forcing connection never works, that what comes with pressure never lasts, that what's truly meant for you will come without you having to chase it down, convince it, or hold on to it for dear life. So the next time you feel yourself falling into pursuit mode, pause, step back. Remember that chasing often triggers retreat. Remember that giving space often invites closeness. Remember that letting go paradoxically brings things to you more effectively than grasping ever could. In that moment of detachment, you don't just change the dynamic with him. You reclaim your power, your peace, and your true magnetic energy. Here's a counterintuitive truth that transforms dating. The most secure attachments begin with detachment. The strongest connections are formed between two people who don't need each other to feel complete. This challenges everything we've been taught about romance, that love means becoming one, that intimacy requires constant connection, that devotion means making someone the center of your world. But the psychology of healthy attachment tells a different story. When you approach dating from a place of emotional independence, knowing you're already whole, already worthy, already living a fulfilling life, you create the foundation for genuine connection. Not the anxious, clinging kind that comes from fear of loss, not the obsessive kind that stems from seeking validation, but the secure, steady kind that comes from two complete people choosing each other freely, again Think about your most desperate moments in dating, those times when you felt you needed someone to choose you, to respond to you, to validate you. The anxiety of waiting for texts, the overthinking of their words, the fear of their withdrawal. That desperate energy, it doesn't create intimacy, it creates dependency. It doesn't invite healthy attachment, it fosters insecurity. It doesn't lead to lasting love. It leads to emotional roller coasters. True intimacy can only exist in the space between two people who could walk away but choose to stay, who don't need each other but deeply want each other, who maintain their individuality while building something together. And that kind of intimacy, it begins with detachment, not emotional coldness, but emotional sovereignty, the understanding that you are responsible for your own fulfillment, not anyone else. This detachment allows you to see the person clearly. Without the fog of projection or desperate need, it allows you to assess compatibility honestly, without forcing connections that aren't there. It allows you to express yourself authentically, without molding yourself to become what you think they want. And most importantly, it allows you to love from abundance rather than scarcity. Giving because you want to, not because you're trying to secure their affection in return. Giving because you're mine. There's a profound difference between being emotionally unavailable and being emotionally regulated. Emotionally unavailable people build walls to protect themselves from hurt. They keep others at arm's length. They avoid vulnerability completely. That's not what detachment is about. Detachment isn't about suppression, it's about balance. It isn't about avoiding feelings, it's about not being controlled by them. And it isn't about closing your heart, it's about opening it without expectation of what comes back. When you practice this kind of healthy detachment, dating transforms from an anxious quest for validation into an authentic exploration of connection. You can be fully present, fully engaged, fully invested in getting to know someone while simultaneously being completely at peace with the possibility that it might not work out. You can express genuine interest without that interest being tangled up in a desperate need for reciprocation. You can appreciate what's unfolding without clinging to outcomes. This is when the most honest relationships form, when you're not performing to be chosen, when you're not strategizing to maintain their interest, when you're not compromising your values to avoid rejection. You're simply being your authentic self, seeing if there's true alignment, and trusting that what's meant for you won't miss you. The beautiful paradox is that this detachment actually creates deeper attachment in the long run. When someone feels they are chosen freely rather than needed desperately, they can relax into the connection without fear of suffocation. When they sense you want them but don't depend on them for your emotional well-being, they can approach the relationship from desire rather than obligation. When they see you maintain your individual life alongside the relationship, they're inspired to bring their best selves rather than retreat from intensity. This is the foundation of secure attachment. Two whole people coming together by choice, not by need. Two individuals maintaining their separate identities while building something meaningful together. Two equals who enhance each other's lives but don't complete each other. And this secure foundation, it can only be built when both people approach the connection from a place of detachment first. So if you want to create the conditions for real lasting love, start with detachment, not as a dating strategy, but as a way of life. Build your wholeness, cultivate your independence, create a life so rich and full that a relationship would be a beautiful addition, but never the sole source of your happiness. From that place of self-contained completeness, you'll naturally attract connections that match your energy, secure, balanced, and deeply fulfilling. Not because you chase them, but because you became the kind of person who inspires them. At the end of the day, detachment isn't about emotional games or manipulation tactics. It's about freedom. Freedom from the anxiety of waiting for texts. Freedom from the roller coaster of emotions based on someone else's behavior. Freedom from seeking external validation to feel worthy of love. It's about reclaiming your energy, your peace, and your personal power in dating. When you master detachment, you stop giving away your emotional sovereignty. You stop letting someone else's actions dictate how you feel about yourself. You stop measuring your worth by whether someone chooses you. Instead, you move through dating with a quiet confidence, knowing that regardless of any outcome, you are already enough. And that energy, that centered, grounded, self-contained energy, is what truly captivates. Think about how much mental and emotional energy you've spent analyzing text messages, questioning intentions, and trying to predict someone's next move. Imagine channeling all that energy back into your own life, your own growth, your own happiness. That's what detachment gives you, not a technique for making someone want you more, but a way of being that returns you to yourself. This doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent. True detachment isn't about suppressing your feelings or pretending not to care. It's about loving openly, but without clinging, showing interest without demanding outcomes, and staying connected to your center regardless of how someone responds to you. It's about recognizing that the right connection doesn't require you to abandon yourself. It invites you to be more authentically yourself. There's a profound difference between the woman who dates from attachment and the woman who dates from detachment. The first approaches relationships from need, needing validation, needing security, needing someone to make her feel chosen. She gives too much too soon, tolerates poor treatment, and often finds herself in the same disappointing patterns. The second approach is from wholeness, knowing her value isn't determined by any one person's ability to recognize it. She's selective with her energy, honors her boundaries, and attracts people who match her level of self-respect. When you truly embody detachment, dating becomes less about seeking and more about allowing, less about pursuing and more about discerning, less about earning love and more about recognizing what naturally aligns with you. You stop chasing people who aren't choosing you. You stop convincing people of your worth. You stop over-investing where you're undervalued. And in that space of emotional freedom, you create room for connections that don't require chase, convincing, or over-invest. The greatest paradox of detachment is that it doesn't lead to disconnection. It leads to deeper, more authentic connection. When you're not coming from a place of desperation or need, you can truly see people for who they are rather than what they can give you. You can make decisions based on genuine compatibility rather than fear of being alone. You can love from a place of choice rather than dependency. And that kind of love, clear-eyed, intentional, freely given, that's the kind that lasts. So, take a deep breath and release the grip of control. Stop tracking response times and analyzing message meanings. Stop twisting yourself into someone you think is more lovable. Stop waiting for external validation to feel worthy. Remember that your peace matters more than any dating outcome. Your wholeness is more important than anyone's approval. Your life is happening now, not when someone decides to choose you. Trust that what's meant for you won't miss you. The connections that are aligned with your authentic self will flow without force. The people who value you will make it clear through consistent actions, not just convenient words. And everything that falls away, everything that doesn't choose you back with equal enthusiasm, it's making space for what truly belongs in your life. The moment you let go of attachment to specific outcomes is the moment you step into your true power in dating. Not the power to control others, but the power to remain unmoved by their choices. Not the power to make someone love you, but the power to love yourself regardless. Not the power to prevent heartbreak, but the power to know you'll be okay, even if it comes. That's the ultimate truth of detachment. It returns you to yourself. It reminds you that you are whole before any relationship, and you'll be whole after. It shows you that the most important connection you'll ever have is the one with yourself. And from that unshakable foundation, you become truly magnetic. Not because you're seeking attention, but because you no longer need it. Not because you're trying to be chosen, but because you've already chosen yourself. So the next time you feel yourself getting caught in the attachment trap, clinging to outcomes, overanalyzing behaviors, or making someone's response the measure of your worth, pause, breathe, return to center. Remind yourself that you are not defined by anyone's ability to see your value. Your worth isn't up for debate. Your happiness isn't in someone else's hands. And with that knowledge firmly anchored in your heart, you can date with detachment, with dignity, and with the quiet confidence that makes you absolutely irresistible